Biker vet mocked. Start Harley, it is yours. Black girl lit engine, none yet could. That sentence hung in the air of a dusty Georgia afternoon like a challenge thrown down by fate itself. The parking lot of Rusty's diner sat quiet under the September sun, heat rising from the cracked asphalt in shimmering waves. 18-wheelers rumbled past on Highway 41, their engines growling against the stillness of the small town that had forgotten how to dream. Earl Whitmore sat alone on a weathered bench outside the diner, his silver beard catching the light, his faded leather vest decorated with patches from a life most people could never understand. 73 years old, 3 tours in Vietnam, 42 years riding the same 1972 Harley-Davidson shovelhead that now sat silent beside him, gleaming black and chrome under the afternoon glare. His hands, thick with calluses and crossed with scars, rested on his knees. His eyes, pale blue like winter sky, stared at nothing and everything at once. The diner behind him buzzed with the usual Saturday crowd. Farmers talked about the drought. Truckers complained about fuel prices. A group of younger men stood near the window, their laughter cutting through the glass like broken promises. They wore clean boots and pressed shirts, their trucks parked in a neat row, each one shinier than the last. They had been watching Earl for the past hour, nudging each other, grinning. One of them, a man named Derek Callahan, pushed through the diner door with a swagger that came from never having earned anything the hard way. His father owned half the car dealerships in 3 counties. His grandfather had been a state senator. Derek had grown up believing the world was something you bought, not something you built. He walked toward Earl with his friends trailing behind, their boots crunching on gravel. Earl did not look up. Derek stopped a few feet away, hands on his hips, head tilted like he was examining something curious and slightly amusing. Well now, he said, loud enough for everyone inside to hear. Look at this. The great Earl Whitmore. Sitting out here with that old pile of rust like he is waiting for a parade. Earl's fingers twitched, but he remained still. Derek circled the Harley slowly, making a show of inspecting it. His friends laughed on cue. Tell me something, old man. Does this thing even run anymore? Or do you just push it around town to feel important? Someone inside the diner pressed against the window. Others gathered near the door, watching. The air thickened with that particular tension that precedes either violence or humiliation. Earl finally raised his eyes. They met Derek's with a steadiness that made the younger man's smile falter for just a moment. She runs, Earl said quietly. Derek snorted. Right. Sure she does. He kicked at the front tire with his designer boot. I bet you could not get this dinosaur started if your life depended on it. Probably why you just sit here day after day, pretending you are something you are not. The words landed like stones in still water. Earl's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Derek sensed advantage and pressed forward. You know what? I will make you a deal, old-timer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, fanning it dramatically. There is $500 here. $500 says nobody in this parking lot can start that engine. And if someone does? He laughed and spread his arms wide. Then the bike is theirs. How about that? A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. More people had emerged from the diner now, drawn by the spectacle. Some shook their heads. Others watched with the hungry curiosity of people who had too little excitement in their lives. Earl looked at the money, then at Derek, then at his Harley. The machine had carried him through jungles and deserts, through grief and joy, through every mile of a life that had been anything but easy. It had never failed him, not once. He stood slowly, joints protesting, and faced the younger man with the calm dignity of someone who had stared down far worse. You want to make that bet? Earl said evenly. Then make it. But understand something, boy. This bike has a soul. She does not answer to just anyone. Derek laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the diner walls. A soul? That is rich. He turned to his friends. You hear that? The old man thinks his motorcycle has feelings. More laughter, more faces at the windows. Earl reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a single key on a worn leather strap. He held it up, letting it catch the light. Anyone who wants to try, he said, can try. But she will choose who rides her. Not me. Not you. Her. Derek snatched the key from Earl's hand before anyone could react. Finally. Let us put this nonsense to rest. He straddled the Harley with exaggerated confidence, inserted the key, and twisted it to the accessory position. The gauges flickered. He pulled out the choke, set the fuel valve, and thumbed the starter button. Nothing. He tried again. The engine turned over once, twice, then fell silent. Derek's face reddened. He adjusted his grip, pumped the throttle, and tried a third time. A fourth. A fifth. The Harley sat motionless, its chrome reflecting his frustration like a mirror. "What the hell is wrong with this thing?" he demanded. Earl had returned to his bench. "Nothing is wrong with her. She just does not like you." Derek threw the key on the ground and dismounted, his composure cracking. "Fine. Whatever. Anyone else want to try? $500 and this piece of junk if you can start it." One by one, men stepped forward. A trucker with forearms like tree trunks. A mechanic who claimed 30 years of experience. Derek's own friends, each one more determined than the last to prove the old man wrong. None of them succeeded. The engine would turn, would cough, would almost catch, but never quite fire. It was as if the machine itself had decided to remain silent, to wait for something or someone that had not yet arrived. The crowd grew restless. Some drifted back inside. Others lingered, sensing that the afternoon was not yet finished. And then she appeared. A girl, maybe 13 years old, walking along the shoulder of the highway with a backpack slung over one shoulder. Her skin was dark brown, her hair pulled back in tight braids, her clothes dusty from travel. She moved with the careful alertness of someone who had learned early that the world was not always kind. She stopped at the edge of the parking lot, watching the commotion with wide, curious eyes. Derek noticed her and waved dismissively. "Keep moving, kid. This is not a show for children." But Earl had already seen her. Something passed across his face, a flicker of recognition or perhaps premonition, and he raised one hand in a small gesture of welcome. The girl hesitated, then walked toward the Harley with steps that seemed pulled by some invisible force. The crowd fell silent. She stood before the motorcycle, studying it with an intensity that seemed far too old for her years. Her fingers reached out and brushed the handlebars, then the fuel tank, then the seat. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent. "What are you doing?" Derek demanded. "Get away from that." But Earl had risen from his bench. He picked up the key from where Derek had thrown it and held it out to the girl. "Would you like to try?" he asked softly. The girl looked at him, then at the key, then at the machine before her. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. She took the key. The crowd pressed closer, whispers rising like wind through dry leaves. Derek crossed his arms, smirking. This should be good. The girl climbed onto the Harley. Her feet barely reached the pegs, but she positioned herself with surprising confidence. She inserted the key, turned it, and sat still for a long moment with her eyes closed. Then she opened them, placed her left hand on the fuel tank, and pressed the starter with her right. The engine roared to life. The sound split the afternoon like thunder, deep and powerful and alive. It echoed off the diner walls, rolled across the parking lot, and seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. The crowd stood frozen in disbelief. Derek's jaw dropped open, his face drained of color. Earl Whitmore smiled for the first time in 3 years. The girl sat astride the rumbling machine, her small frame somehow perfectly suited to its power, her eyes bright with something that looked almost like joy. She had started what none of them could. She had awakened something that had been waiting, patient and silent, for exactly this moment. And everything that came before, everything that came after, would be measured against that single impossible afternoon when a black girl lit an engine that none yet could. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. Stories like this one remind us that courage has no age, strength has no color, and miracles happen when we least expect them. Subscribe now so you never miss another moment where ordinary people do extraordinary things. The engine continued to idle, its rhythmic pulse filling the stunned silence of the parking lot. The girl sat motionless on the Harley, her hands resting lightly on the handlebars, her expression unreadable. Exhaust fumes curled into the September air like smoke signals from another world. Earl approached slowly, each step measured and deliberate. He stopped beside the motorcycle and looked at the girl with eyes that seemed to see far more than the dusty teenager before him. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the engine. The girl considered the question as if weighing whether to answer. Finally, she spoke. "Maya. Maya Robinson." Earl nodded, the name settling into his memory like something he had always known. "Where are you headed, Maya Robinson?" She looked down at the fuel tank, then out toward the highway stretching endlessly in both directions. "Nowhere," she said. "Anywhere." The crowd had begun to recover from their shock. Derek pushed forward, his face twisted with disbelief and wounded pride. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "She must have done something. There is a trick." The old man set this up. Earl turned to face him with a calm that bordered on pity. "No trick, boy. I told you. The bike chooses." Derek jabbed a finger toward Maya. "I want to know how she did it. Right now." Maya killed the engine with a simple twist of the key. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise had been. She dismounted with fluid grace and held the key out toward Earl. "It was not me," she said quietly. "It was her. Your motorcycle. She was ready." Earl accepted the key but made no move to take it back. Instead, he studied the girl before him with growing curiosity. The backpack on her shoulder was worn thin at the seams. Her shoes had holes near the toes. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard roads. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked. Maya's chin lifted slightly, a flash of pride crossing her features. "I am fine." That was not what I asked. Behind them, the diner door opened and a woman emerged. Her name was Ruth Ann Perkins, and she had owned Rusty's Diner for 31 years, ever since her husband passed and left her nothing but debt and determination. She was 64 years old, broad-shouldered, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Earl Whitmore!" she called out, her voice carrying across the lot with the authority of someone who had spent decades managing unruly customers. "You bring that child inside right this minute, and the rest of you, show's over. Either buy something or move along." The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling, others casting curious glances back at the girl who had accomplished what none of them could. Derek and his friends retreated to their trucks, though Derek's expression promised that this was not the end of the matter. Earl gestured toward the diner. "After you." Maya hesitated, her eyes darting between the old man and the building, as if calculating risk and reward. Finally, she nodded and walked toward the entrance with Earl following a few steps behind. Inside, Rusty's Diner was a time capsule of American roadside culture. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. A long counter ran the length of the room, backed by chrome stools with cracked leather seats. The walls were covered with photographs and memorabilia, spanning 5 decades of highway history. The smell of coffee and frying bacon hung in the air like a promise of simpler times. Ruth Ann pointed to a booth near the back. "Sit. Both of you. I will bring food." Maya slid into the booth, placing her backpack beside her with the careful protectiveness of someone whose possessions were few and precious. Earl took the seat across from her, removing his leather vest and hanging it on a hook by the window. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the diner filled the space between them. Plates clinking, coffee pouring, muted conversations from other tables. Finally, Earl broke the silence. "That was something. What you did out there." Maya shrugged, though her eyes remained alert. "Like I said, it was not me." The motorcycle wanted to start. Earl leaned back, studying her. "Most people would call that nonsense. Most people do not know how to listen." Something shifted in Earl's expression, a recognition of kindred spirit, perhaps, or the echo of memories long buried. He had known soldiers who spoke that way, men who had survived because they trusted instincts that could not be explained. "How old are you, Maya?" 13. She paused. "Almost 14. And your family?" The question hung in the air like an unexploded shell. Maya's face closed down, all expression retreating behind walls built from necessity. "Gone," she said flatly. "It is just me now." Earl absorbed this without visible reaction, though something tightened in his chest. He had lost his own family years ago, his wife to cancer, his daughter to a car accident that still haunted his dreams, his grandson to a war in a desert far from home. He understood alone in ways most people never would. Ruth Ann arrived with 2 plates piled high with eggs, bacon, toast, and hash browns. She set them down without ceremony and fixed Maya with a stern but kind gaze. "Eat every bite," she commanded. "You are too thin by half." Maya looked at the food with barely concealed hunger but made no move to touch it. "I cannot pay. Did I ask you to?" Ruth Ann's voice softened. "Eat, child. We will figure out the rest later." She walked away, and Maya finally picked up her fork. She ate slowly at first, then faster as hunger overcame pride. Earl watched her without comment, pushing his own plate aside. When Maya had finished, she sat back with a small sigh of contentment. "Thank you," she said quietly. Earl nodded. "You want to tell me how you ended up walking Highway 41 with nowhere to go?" Maya was silent for so long that Earl thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. "My grandmother raised me. My mama left when I was 2. Never knew my daddy. Grandma was everything. She taught me about engines, about machines. She used to work at a motorcycle shop back in the 70s. One of the only black women doing that kind of work. She said machines had souls, that they could feel who was trying to help them and who was just using them." Earl listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing of the emotions stirring beneath the surface. "She passed 6 months ago," Maya continued. "They put me in a foster home. Then another. Then another." She looked down at her hands. "The last one was not good. So I left. Been walking ever since." "Where are you trying to get to?" Maya shook her head. "I told you. Nowhere. Anywhere that is not where I was." The afternoon light slanted through the diner windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. Outside, the Harley sat silent in the parking lot, chrome gleaming like a beacon. Earl reached into his vest pocket and pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded from years of handling. He slid it across the table to Maya. She picked it up carefully. The image showed a young black woman in coveralls, standing proudly beside a motorcycle. Her smile was radiant, her eyes bright with confidence and joy. "Who is this?" Maya asked. "Her name was Lorraine Whitmore, my wife's sister. She worked with me in the shop for 15 years. Best mechanic I ever knew." Earl's voice caught slightly. "She passed in 89. Cancer took her, same as it took my Ellen." Maya studied the photograph with new interest. "She looks like she really loved what she did." "She did." Earl took the photograph back and tucked it away. "She used to say the same thing your grandmother did, that machines have souls, that they choose who they trust. I thought it was just poetry, but after what I saw today, I am not so sure." The diner door opened and a sheriff's deputy walked in. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with the eager alertness of someone new to the badge. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Maya with obvious interest. Ruth Ann intercepted him before he could approach. "Can I help you, deputy?" "Got a report of a runaway," he said, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Young black female, approximately 13 years old. Anyone see someone matching that description?" Maya's body tensed. Her hand moved toward her backpack, ready to run. But Earl reached across the table and placed his weathered palm over her fingers. "Steady," he murmured. "Let me handle this." He rose from the booth and walked toward the deputy with the unhurried confidence of a man who had faced far worse than small-town law enforcement. "Deputy," he said pleasantly, "I am Earl Whitmore. Been living in this town for 47 years. Served 3 tours in Vietnam. Ran the only motorcycle repair shop within 50 miles until I retired. And I can tell you with certainty that there is no runaway in this diner. Just my granddaughter visiting for the weekend." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "Your granddaughter?" "That is right." Earl's gaze held steady. "Any problem with that?" The deputy looked from Earl to Maya and back again. Something in Earl's expression must have communicated a warning, because the younger man's posture shifted from assertive to uncertain. "No, sir," he said finally. "No problem. Just doing my job." "Then you are done here." Earl gestured toward the door. "Have a good afternoon, deputy." The deputy hesitated, then turned and walked out without another word. Through the window, they watched him climb into his patrol car and drive away. Maya stared at Earl with a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. Why did you do that? Earl returned to the booth and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. Because, he said quietly, sometimes the right thing to do is not the same as the legal thing. And because 40 years ago, someone did the same for Lorraine when the system tried to fail her. He looked at Maya with an intensity that seemed to see past her defenses, past her fear, into whatever stubborn spark of hope still flickered in her chest. I have got a house with empty rooms, he said. I have got a shop full of motorcycles that have not been touched in 3 years. And I have got about as much time left on this earth as that deputy has experience on the job. He paused. What I do not have is anyone to leave it all to. Anyone who would understand what it means. Anyone who knows how to listen to a machine's soul. Maya's eyes widened. What are you saying? I am saying that bike out there chose you for a reason. And I am too old and too tired to believe in coincidences anymore. The diner hummed around them, a bubble of ordinary life surrounding an extraordinary moment. I am not looking for charity, Maya said carefully. Good. Because I am not offering any. Earl's voice hardened slightly. I am offering work, hard work, learning a trade that most people think is dying, proving every day that you deserve to be here. And maybe if you stick it out, inheriting something worth having when I am gone. Maya looked down at the table, then out the window at the Harley, then back at the old man whose life had somehow intersected with hers on a dusty September afternoon. Why me? She asked finally. Earl smiled, and for a moment, the weight of years seemed to lift from his shoulders. Because you started what none of them could, he said. And I want to know what else you can do. Weeks passed like water finding its level, settling into the cracks and channels of a new existence. Maya moved into the small guest room at the back of Earl's house, a modest ranch-style home on 5 acres just outside of town. The room had belonged to Earl's daughter once, decades ago, and still held traces of a teenage girl's dreams. Faded posters on the walls, a bookshelf filled with novels from another era, a window that faced east, greeting each morning with soft light. Behind the house stood a metal building that had served as Earl's repair shop for 40 years. Inside, a dozen motorcycles waited in various states of assembly and disrepair. Tools hung on pegboard walls in perfect order, workbenches lined with parts, fluids, and the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent making broken things whole again. This, Earl said on their first morning in the shop, is where the real learning happens. He handed Maya a shop manual thicker than any textbook she had ever seen. It was weathered, dog-eared, annotated in the margins with handwritten notes. Read the first 3 chapters by tonight, he instructed. Tomorrow we start on the basics. Maya had never been much of a student in the traditional sense. Foster homes did not encourage academic excellence. Schools saw her as a problem to be managed rather than a mind to be developed. But something about the technical language of engines spoke to her in a way that Shakespeare and algebra never had. She devoured the manual in 2 days. Earl tested her knowledge with questions that ranged from simple to complex. He showed her how to identify different engine types, how to read oil viscosity, how to listen for the subtle sounds that distinguished a healthy machine from a troubled one. Your grandmother taught you well, he admitted after the first week. You have got instincts that cannot be learned from books. She used to let me help in her garage, Maya said, before she got too sick to work. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings began with coffee and planning. Days were spent in the shop, hands blackened with grease, minds focused on the intricate puzzles of mechanical resurrection. Evenings brought simple meals and quieter lessons, stories of the old days, the way things used to be before the world got so complicated. Ruth Ann stopped by regularly, bringing food and checking on their progress with the watchful concern of a woman who had seen too much hardship to trust good fortune. That girl is special, she told Earl one evening while Maya was in the shop. You know that, right? Earl nodded slowly. I know. That is what worries me. The town had not forgotten the incident at the diner. Rumors spread the way they always do in small communities, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. By the end of the first week, the story had evolved from a simple motorcycle starting to something approaching local legend. Derek Callahan had not forgotten either. He appeared at Earl's property on a Tuesday afternoon. driving his oversized pickup truck down the gravel driveway with more speed than sense. Dust billowed behind him like a challenge. Earl emerged from the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. Maya stayed inside, watching through a grimy window. "Whitmore!" Derek called out as he climbed from the truck. "We need to talk." "Then talk," Earl replied evenly. Derek strutted toward him, chest puffed out, trying to project confidence he did not feel. "That stunt you pulled at the diner, making me look like a fool in front of everyone. You did that yourself, boy. I just provided the stage." Derek's face reddened. "I want a rematch. Right here, right now. Your bike against my truck, pink slips. Whoever loses walks home." Earl actually laughed, a sound rough from disuse. "You want to bet your $60,000 truck against a motorcycle that is older than you are? It is not about the value. It is about proving that old piece of junk only starts when you rig it to." Derek jabbed a finger toward the shop. "And I want that girl to try again. In front of witnesses. So everyone can see it was a trick." Inside the shop, Maya felt her stomach tighten. She had spent 3 weeks trying to understand what had happened that day, how she had coaxed an engine to life that had defeated everyone else. The truth was, she did not know. It had felt right, that was all. Like the machine had been waiting for her. Earl's expression hardened. "The girl is not part of your games. Then you are admitting it was fake." Derek smirked triumphantly. "I knew it. I am admitting nothing of the sort." Earl took a step closer, and despite the 30-year age difference, something in his bearing made Derek instinctively step back. "What I am saying is that Maya has nothing to prove to you or anyone else. She started that engine. You could not. That is the end of it." But Derek was not ready to concede. His pride had been wounded, and wounded pride in men like him tended to fester. "Fine," he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "You want to protect your little project? That is your business. But this town has rules, Whitmore. And one of them is that people like her do not just show up and start taking things that do not belong to them. People like her." The words hung in the air like poison. Earl's eyes went cold in a way that Maya had not seen before. She watched through the window as the old man seemed to grow larger, filling the space between himself and Derek with something that transcended physical size. "Let me tell you something about people like her," Earl said, his voice low and deadly calm. "People like her have more courage, more character, and more God-given talent than you will ever understand. People like her built this country, while people like you sat back and took credit for it. And people like her are exactly who deserves every opportunity that comes their way." Derek opened his mouth to respond, but Earl was not finished. "Now get off my property before I show you exactly what an old man with nothing left to lose is capable of." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Derek laughed, a hollow sound that fooled no one. "This is not over," he said, backing toward his truck. "You will regret this, Whitmore. Both of you." He climbed into his vehicle and tore down the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust and the echo of his threats behind. Maya emerged from the shop, her face troubled. "You should not have done that." Earl turned to her, his expression softening. "Done what? Told the truth? Made an enemy?" She shook her head. "People like him do not forget. People like him have been trying to make me forget who I am for 73 years. Earl placed a hand on her shoulder. "They have not succeeded yet." That evening, as the sun set over the Georgia hills, they sat on the porch and watched the sky turn from gold to purple to black. The Harley sat nearby, its chrome catching the last light like captured stars. "Earl," Maya said quietly. "Yes? Why does it matter so much? The bike, I mean. Why did you let Derek mock you instead of just starting it yourself?" Earl was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "Because," he said finally, "I made a promise. 3 years ago, when my grandson was killed overseas, I promised myself I would not ride again until I found someone worthy of carrying on what I built. What Lorraine built. What this family has always believed in." He looked at Maya, and in the fading light, she could see the depth of loss and hope mingled in his eyes. "That engine has not started for anyone since the day I made that promise," he continued. "Not for me. Not for mechanics who tried to tell me there was nothing wrong with it. Not for anyone. Until you." Maya felt something shift inside her, a weight of responsibility settling onto shoulders that were still learning how to carry such things. "I do not know if I am worthy," she whispered. Earl smiled, the expression carrying more warmth than she had seen from him before. "Neither did Lorraine," he said. "Neither did any of us at the beginning. Worthiness is not something you are born with, Maya. It is something you earn, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one act of courage at a time." The stars emerged overhead, ancient and indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. But in that moment, sitting on that porch, Maya felt less alone than she had in months. She also felt for the first time like she might actually belong somewhere. The feeling terrified her as much as it comforted her. If you are feeling the way Maya felt right now, if this story is touching something deep inside your heart, type in the comments, "She deserves this chance." Those 4 words, "She deserves this chance," will mean more than you know. Leave that comment right now before you forget, because Maya is not just a character. Maya is every child who has ever been told they are not enough. Maya is every dream that refused to die. And your comment might be the blessing someone else needs to see today. October arrived with cooler mornings and the first hints of autumn color in the trees surrounding Earl's property. Maya had grown more confident in the shop, her hands moving with increasing surety as she learned the language of engines. She could now identify problems by sound alone, could disassemble and reassemble a carburetor blindfolded, could read the subtle signs of metal fatigue and oil degradation. But it was not just technical knowledge that grew. Something deeper was taking root, a sense of purpose that had been absent from her life since her grandmother passed. She found herself waking before dawn, eager to get to work. She found herself dreaming of motorcycle parts, of the perfect harmony of a well-tuned engine. Earl noticed the change and said nothing, letting her development unfold at its own pace. He had learned long ago that some things could not be rushed, that true mastery came from patience rather than pressure. One morning, he led her to a corner of the shop she had not yet explored. A tarp covered something large, and dust had gathered in the folds of the fabric. "This," Earl said, "is your project." He pulled back the tarp to reveal a motorcycle in pieces. Literally. The frame sat alone on a lift, stripped of every component. Boxes filled with parts surrounded it like offerings at an altar. "What is it?" Maya asked, her eyes wide. 1968 Harley Davidson Electroglide. Earl ran his hand along the bare frame with obvious affection. "I bought her at an auction 20 years ago, planning to restore her. But then life got in the way. She has been waiting ever since." Maya walked around the skeleton of the machine, taking in the scale of the work ahead. "This will take months." At least Earl agreed. "Maybe longer. But when you are done, when you have rebuilt her from nothing with your own 2 hands, you will understand something that most people never learn." "What is that?" "That the destination is not the point." Earl met her eyes. "The journey is the point. Every bolt you tighten, every wire you connect, every problem you solve, you are not just building a motorcycle. You are building yourself." Maya felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. She looked at the disassembled machine and saw not a daunting task but an opportunity, a canvas, a future waiting to be shaped. "I will do it," she said quietly. "I know you will." Earl smiled. "That is why I waited until now to show you." The work began that same day. Maya started with the basics, inventorying parts and cross-referencing them against the shop manual Earl provided. She discovered that some components were missing, others damaged beyond repair. Earl made lists and placed orders, teaching her the network of suppliers and salvage yards that kept old machines alive. As the days passed, word spread about what was happening at the Whitmore property. Other motorcycle enthusiasts began stopping by, curious to see the restoration project and the young girl who had somehow captured old Earl's attention. Most were supportive, offering advice and spare parts. A few were skeptical, doubting that a teenager, much less a black girl from foster care, could complete such an ambitious undertaking. Maya learned to ignore the doubters. She had been underestimated her entire life. It had taught her to let her work speak louder than words. One afternoon, a familiar pickup truck appeared at the end of the driveway. Maya was alone in the shop. Earl had driven into town for supplies, and the sun was just beginning its descent toward the horizon. Derek Callahan stepped out of his truck, but he was not alone this time. Two other men emerged from the passenger side, both wearing expressions that promised trouble. Maya's hand instinctively moved toward the wrench lying on the workbench nearby. She watched them approach through the open bay door of the shop, her heart rate steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Well, well," Derek said, stepping inside. The little mechanic, all alone. "Can I help you?" Maya kept her voice calm, her posture neutral. Derek laughed. "Help me? No, I do not think so." He walked along the workbenches, casually touching tools and parts with a deliberate disregard for their organization. "I am here to make you an offer." "I am not interested in your offers. You have not heard it yet." Derek picked up a chrome component, some kind of valve cover, and examined it with theatrical interest. "My father owns 3 car dealerships. He is always looking for young people with mechanical skills. I could get you a job there, real money, real future, better than wasting your time in this dump with a crazy old man." Maya's jaw tightened. "This dump is my home. And Earl is not crazy." Derek set the part down, but his placement was slightly off, a small violation that said more than words could. Home. Right. For how long? Until the old man dies and his real family shows up to kick you out? Until social services tracks you down and drags you back to wherever you came from? He stepped closer, and his companions moved to flank the exits. Maya noted their positions without looking directly at them. Her grandmother had taught her that awareness was the first line of defense. "I am trying to do you a favor here," Derek continued. "Take the job. Leave this place. Everyone wins. And if I refuse?" Derek's smile revealed too many teeth. "Then maybe things get difficult. Maybe someone tips off the authorities about an undocumented minor living with an unrelated adult. Maybe someone files complaints about the noise and the chemicals coming from this shop. Maybe life becomes very inconvenient for both of you." Maya felt anger rising in her chest, hot and familiar. She had faced bullies before, in foster homes and on playgrounds and in 100 small moments of cruelty. She had learned that showing fear only made them worse. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice dropping to a register that surprised even her. "I think you are scared." Derek's smile faltered. "Excuse me? I think you have never worked for anything in your life. Everything you have was handed to you. And when you see someone earning what you could not even buy, it terrifies you. Because deep down, you know the truth." "And what truth is that?" Derek's voice had lost some of its confidence. "That all your money, all your daddy's dealerships, all your friends and their fake loyalty, none of it matters." Maya stepped forward, and something in her bearing made Derek step back involuntarily. "Because when you die, no one will remember you. No one will tell stories about you. No one will say that Derek Callahan made the world better." She gestured around the shop at the tools and machines and half-assembled dreams. "But this matters. Earl matters. What we are building here matters. And you can threaten us all you want, but you cannot take that away. Because it is something you do not even understand." Silence filled the shop. Derek's companions shifted uncomfortably. The confrontation had not gone the way any of them expected. Derek recovered first, his face flushing with humiliation. "You think you are so smart, do you? Fine. Have it your way. But remember, when everything falls apart, I offered you a way out." He turned and stalked toward the door, his friends following. But at the threshold, he paused and looked back. "This is not over," he said. "Yes," Maya replied quietly. "It is." They left, and Maya stood alone in the gathering dusk, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. She had won this battle, but she knew the war was far from finished. When Earl returned an hour later, she told him everything. He listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You did good," he said finally. "Stood your ground. Spoke your truth. He is going to make trouble for us. Probably." Earl set down the bags of supplies he had brought. But trouble was coming anyway, one way or another. At least now we know what form it will take. "What do we do?" Earl looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not fear but resolve. "Same thing we have always done," he said. "Keep working, keep building, keep proving them wrong." He placed a hand on her shoulder, and the weight of it was both comforting and galvanizing. "They want to break us, Maya. Do not let them. The best revenge is not anger or violence or even justice. The best revenge is success. Living well, becoming everything they said you could not be." Maya nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle into her spirit. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Inside, the half-assembled electric glide waited for tomorrow's work. And somewhere in the space between them, something like hope began to take root. November brought frost and the kind of clear, cold days that made everything seem sharper and more real. Maya had made significant progress on the Electroglide. The frame was now dressed in its primary components. The engine block, though not yet running, sat in place like a mechanical heart waiting to beat. The wheels were mounted, the exhaust system partially connected. Earl watched her work with increasing pride, though he was careful not to praise too effusively. He had learned that Maya responded better to quiet acknowledgement than to overt compliments. Her confidence came from within, from the satisfaction of solving problems and the tangible evidence of her own capability. The town had begun to change its attitude as well. Word had spread about Derek's confrontation at the shop and about the young girl who had stood up to him without flinching. People started stopping by more frequently, not just other motorcycle enthusiasts, but ordinary citizens who wanted to see for themselves the partnership that had become local legend. Ruth Ann organized an informal support network. Plates of food appeared on the porch. Anonymous donations of parts showed up in the mailbox. One morning, Maya found a handwritten note tucked under the shop door. "You inspired my daughter to start fixing things instead of throwing them away. Thank you." She kept the note in her pocket, taking it out to read when the work got frustrating. But the shadow of Derek Callahan still hung over them. True to his word, he had begun making trouble. Health inspectors appeared twice, citing minor violations that required expensive corrections. The power company conducted an audit that resulted in increased rates. Someone spread rumors that Earl was not mentally fit to care for himself, much less a child. Each obstacle was dealt with, but the cumulative effect was wearing. Earl's savings, while substantial, were not infinite. And Maya could see the toll that constant vigilance was taking on the old man who had become something like family to her. One December evening, as they sat by the fire in Earl's living room, Maya finally voiced what had been troubling her for weeks. "You could send me away," she said quietly. "Let them win. Your life would be easier." Earl looked up from the book he had been reading, his eyes sharp despite his years. "That what you want? To run away?" "No." Maya shook her head. "But it is not fair to you. All this trouble, all this cost. Just because you took in a stray nobody wanted." Earl set down his book and leaned forward. His hands, scarred and calloused, reached out to take hers. "Let me tell you something about fair," he said. "Fair is a word people use when they want to justify giving up. Fair does not build anything. Fair does not change anything. Fair is the excuse of the weak." His grip tightened slightly. "You are not a stray, Maya. You never were. You are a gift. A second chance I did not deserve and sure as hell did not expect. And if fighting to keep you means spending every last dollar I have, fighting every bureaucrat and bully who gets in our way, then that is exactly what I will do." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back, but Earl had already seen. "Do not be ashamed of that," he said softly. "Tears are not weakness. Tears are the price of caring about something. And caring is the only thing that makes life worth living." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling and popping, the old house settling around them like a faithful friend. Finally, Maya spoke again. "I want to finish the bike, before Christmas. I want to show everyone what we built." Earl smiled. "That is ambitious. The engine is not even running yet." "I know, but I can do it. I feel like," she paused, searching for words. "I feel like everything has been leading to this. The motorcycle at the diner, learning from you, all of it. This bike is supposed to be finished before the year ends. I cannot explain how I know, but I do." Earl studied her face in the firelight, seeing something there that transcended reason. "Then we better get to work," he said. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity. Maya worked from dawn until late at night, fueled by determination and an endless supply of Ruth Ann's coffee and sandwiches. Earl supervised, offered guidance, and handled the tasks that required experience or strength she did not yet possess. Other helpers appeared. Tom Mitchell, a retired electrician, came by to assist with the wiring harness. Maria Gonzalez, who had been an automotive painter in another life, offered to handle the finish work. Even Sheriff Wilson, who had initially been suspicious of Maya's presence in town, dropped off a box of chrome parts he had been keeping in his garage since the 80s. The community was rallying around them in ways that no one could have predicted. On December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, Maya stood before the completed motorcycle. The 1968 Electra Glide gleamed under the shop lights, every component in place, every surface polished to perfection. It was beautiful in a way that transcended mere aesthetics. It was a testament to perseverance, to skill, to the stubborn refusal to give up. Only one thing remained. The engine had to start. Maya had done everything by the book. Fuel system primed, electrical connections checked and rechecked, oil levels proper, battery charged. Every component that needed to work for ignition was in place and functional. But she remembered Earl's words from that first day at the diner. The bike chooses. What if, after all this work, the machine refused to accept her? She climbed onto the seat, feeling the familiar weight of the motorcycle beneath her. Her hands found the handlebars. Her feet found the pegs. She closed her eyes and placed her palm against the fuel tank, just as she had done months ago with the shovel head. "Please," she whispered. Then she turned the key. The engine roared to life. The sound filled the shop, rich and powerful, the voice of a machine reborn after decades of silence. It echoed off the walls, shook the tools on their pegs, and seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Earl stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. He made no move to wipe them away. "You did it," he said, his voice cracking. "God help me, you actually did it." Maya revved the engine, feeling the vibration travel through her body like electricity. The Electroglide responded to her touch with perfect precision, as if they had been riding together for years instead of meeting for the first time. She killed the engine and looked at Earl with a smile that transformed her entire face. "We did it," she corrected. "Together." Earl walked forward and wrapped his arms around her in an embrace that said more than words ever could. For a long moment they stood there, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, united by machines and mutual need and something that might, if you squinted at it from the right angle, look a lot like love. When they finally separated, Earl's expression had shifted. There was joy there, certainly, but also something else. Calculation. Purpose. "I have an idea," he said. "What?" "Christmas Eve. The diner. We are going to give this town something to remember." Maya's eyes widened as she understood what he was proposing. "You want to ride. We want to ride." Earl grinned, looking younger than he had in years. "You on the Electroglide, me on the shovelhead, right through the middle of town. Let everyone see what a 13-year-old girl and a 73-year-old man can accomplish when people stop underestimating them." Maya felt a surge of excitement mixed with fear. "What about Derek? What about all the people who want to see us fail? Let them watch." Earl's voice hardened. "Let them see exactly what they are up against, and then let them decide what kind of town they want to live in." It was audacious. It was risky. It was exactly the kind of bold gesture that Maya had been craving without knowing it. "Okay," she said. "Let us do it." Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in the kind of weather that Georgia rarely sees. A light snow had fallen overnight, dusting the town in white and transforming familiar landscapes into something almost magical. The temperature hovered just below freezing, cold enough to see your breath, warm enough that the roads remained clear. Rusty's diner was packed by mid-afternoon. Word had spread about Earl and Maya's planned ride, and people had come from 3 counties to witness what everyone was calling either a miracle or a disaster in the making. Derek Callahan was there too, positioned near the window with his usual entourage, watching the road with barely concealed hostility. At 4 o'clock, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, a sound emerged from the distance. It started as a low rumble, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but grew steadily louder until there was no mistaking it. Engines. Two of them, harmonizing in a mechanical duet that seemed to echo across the frozen fields. They appeared at the crest of the hill, silhouetted against the amber sky. Earl, on his 1972 Shovelhead, the machine that had refused to start for anyone until Maya had coaxed it to life. And beside him, Maya herself, riding the 1968 Electra Glide that she had rebuilt from nothing over the past 3 months. The crowd spilled out of the diner, gathering along the roadside to watch. The cold was forgotten. The old grievances were forgotten. For this one moment there was only awe. They rode in perfect formation, their speed steady and deliberate, the snow swirling around them like confetti. Maya handled the Electra Glide with confidence that belied her age, her posture straight, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Earl rode beside her, matching her pace, his silver beard flying in the wind, a smile splitting his face. As they passed the diner, Earl raised one hand in salute. Maya did the same. The crowd erupted in cheers. They continued through town, past the hardware store and the post office, past the church where children were rehearsing for the evening's nativity play, past the gas station and the barber shop and all the ordinary places where ordinary lives unfolded. Everywhere they went, people stopped to watch, to point, to wave. By the time they completed their circuit and returned to the diner, a transformation had taken place. The skepticism that had greeted Maya's arrival 3 months ago had been replaced by something warmer. Something like acceptance. Something like pride. They parked the motorcycles in front of the diner and dismounted to applause that seemed to shake the snow from the trees. Ruth Ann emerged with cups of hot chocolate, pressing them into their cold hands. "You two are something else," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just doing what needed to be done," Earl replied, but his eyes were shining. Maya stood beside the Electra Glide, one hand resting on its fuel tank, feeling the lingering warmth of the engine through her gloves. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who had doubted her, helped her, challenged her, and ultimately embraced her. This was not the life she'd imagined when she walked down Highway 41 6 months ago with nowhere to go. This was better. This was real. Derek pushed through the crowd, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Maya tensed, expecting another confrontation. But something had changed in the younger man's demeanor. The arrogance was still there, but it had been tempered by something else. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the beginnings of respect. He stopped a few feet away, looking from Maya to the Electra Glide and back again. "You really built that?" he asked. "Every bolt," Maya replied evenly. Derek was silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, including his own, he extended his hand. "That is impressive," he said. "I can admit when I was wrong." Maya studied his face, searching for the trick, the hidden mockery. She found only grudging sincerity. She took his hand and shook it firmly. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Derek nodded awkwardly, then retreated into the crowd, his friends trailing behind with expressions of utter confusion. Earl watched the exchange with raised eyebrows. "Well, did not see that coming." "People can surprise you," Maya said quietly. "Sometimes even the ones you least expect." The afternoon faded into evening. The crowd eventually dispersed, returning to their homes and families for Christmas Eve celebrations. But before they left, many stopped to shake Earl's hand, to compliment Maya, to express their support in small but meaningful ways. Ruth Ann closed the diner early and joined Earl and Maya for a simple Christmas Eve dinner at the Whitmore house. They sat around the kitchen table, eating ham and potatoes and green beans, talking about everything and nothing. After the meal, Earl excused himself and returned with a small wrapped package. He set it before Maya with a ceremonial gravity that made her heart quicken. "Open it," he said. She unwrapped the paper carefully, revealing a velvet box. Inside, resting on a cushion of dark fabric, was a key. But not just any key. This one was attached to a leather strap, worn and familiar. Maya looked up, her eyes wide. "This is the key to the Shovelhead." Earl nodded. "It is yours now. But I thought, you said you would not ride until you found someone worthy. You said the bike would choose." She did choose. 3 months ago, in that parking lot. Earl's voice was steady but emotional. And tonight, you proved that I was right to trust her judgment. That bike is yours, Maya. When I am gone, whenever that may be, both of them are yours. The shovel head, the Electra Glide, the shop, the house, everything. Maya could not speak. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks, and she made no effort to stop them. Why? She finally managed. Earl reached across the table and took her hand. Because family is not about blood, it is about who shows up, who stays, who fights beside you when the world turns against you. He squeezed her fingers gently. You showed up, Maya Robinson. You stayed. You fought. And you earned every single thing that is coming to you. Ruth Ann was crying too, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin and trying to pretend she was not. This is the most beautiful Christmas I have had in 20 years, she declared. Maya looked at the key in her hand, then at the two people who had become her family, then out the window at the snow-covered yard where 2 motorcycles waited for tomorrow's adventures. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. They spent the rest of the evening by the fire, sharing stories and laughter, and the quiet contentment of people who have found where they belong. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white and transforming the Georgia countryside into a winter wonderland. At midnight, the church bells rang in the distance, announcing the arrival of Christmas Day. Earl raised his cup of hot chocolate. To new beginnings. To family, Ruth Ann added. Maya lifted her own cup, feeling the warmth spread through her hands and into her heart. To second chances, she said. They drank together, and the moment stretched into something eternal. The girl who had walked down Highway 41 with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart had found a home. The old man who had lost everyone he loved had found a reason to keep living. The town that had forgotten how to believe in miracles had witnessed one unfold before their eyes. And somewhere in that cold December night, a 13-year-old black girl dreamed of engines and open roads and a future that was finally, beautifully, undeniably hers. If you watch this far, it is because this story touched something deep inside you. It is because you believe, like Maya and Earl believe, that courage has no age, strength has no color, and family is not about blood but about who shows up. Leave a comment saying, I watched this far. Those 4 words will help me get to know you, will help me understand who truly connects with these stories, and will remind you that you are part of a community that believes in second chances. Type it right now. I watched this far. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that miracles still happen. Share it with someone who has been told they are not enough. Share it with someone who has given up on finding where they belong. Because Maya's story is not just about motorcycles. It is about every person who has ever been underestimated. It is about every dream that refused to die. It is about the simple, powerful truth that when we stop looking at labels and start seeing people, extraordinary things become possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And remember, the engine does not care who you are, where you come from, or what people say about you. The engine only knows one thing. If you have the courage to try, it will answer. If you are new to this channel, subscribe now. Every story we tell is a reminder that goodness still exists, that courage still matters, and that hope is never wasted on those who refuse to give up. Hit that subscribe button and join the family. We take care of our own here. Until next time, keep writing. Keep fighting. Keep believing. Because you deserve this chance too. 1 month later, Maya received a letter in the mail. It was from the state, officially acknowledging Earl as her legal guardian. The paperwork that had seemed impossible 6 months ago had somehow moved through the system with unprecedented speed. Ruth Ann claimed she knew nothing about it, but her smile suggested otherwise. 3 months after that, Maya won first place in the regional youth mechanics competition, the youngest competitor and the first black girl to take home the trophy. Earl sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. 6 months later, Derek Callahan enrolled in a community college automotive program. He told people it was because of business opportunities, but those who knew him well noticed that he had started volunteering at a youth center on weekends, teaching kids basic car maintenance. And every year after, on Christmas Eve, Maya and Earl would take their ride through town. As Earl grew older, the rides grew shorter. But they never stopped. Not until the very end. When Earl passed at 81, peacefully in his sleep, the funeral was attended by over 300 people. Maya, now 21 and running the shop full-time, spoke at the service. "He taught me that machines have souls," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "That they choose who they trust, and that the measure of a person is not what they are given, but what they do with it." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. "Earl Whitmore gave me everything. His knowledge, his legacy, his love. And I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift, because that is what family does. That is what he taught me." After the service, Maya rode the shovelhead one last time. She rode it to the diner, to the spot where she had first started that engine 3 long years ago. She parked it there and sat for a while, remembering. Then she started the engine, and the sound was the same as it had always been. Rich, powerful, alive. She smiled, and she rode home. The shop is still there, on those 5 acres outside of town. The sign above the door reads, "Whitmore and Robinson Motorcycle Repair." Inside, the walls are covered with photographs. Earl in his youth, Lorraine in her coveralls, Maya at various ages, always with grease on her hands and pride in her eyes. People come from all over the state now, seeking repairs and restorations. They come because the work is excellent, the prices are fair, and the story behind the shop is one that everyone wants to be part of. But they also come for something else, something harder to define. They come because there is a feeling in that place, a sense that machines are not just metal and rubber and oil, that they are something more, that they remember, that they choose. Maya has never been able to explain how she started that engine on that September afternoon. She has tried, in interviews and conversations and late-night reflections. The closest she has come is this. "I listened," she said, "not with my ears, with something deeper. I listened, and she answered." It is not a scientific explanation. It is not rational or logical or anything that could be replicated in a laboratory. But it is true. And in the end, truth is all that matters. The legacy continues. Maya has trained a dozen young mechanics over the years, passing on Earl's techniques and her grandmother's wisdom and her own hard-won knowledge. Several of them have gone on to open their own shops, spreading the philosophy of listening to machines across the country, but Maya stays. The 5 acres, the shop, the house where Earl taught her what family really means. She stays because this is where she belongs. This is where she was reborn. This is where a black girl with nothing but courage and a gift she did not understand became something more than anyone expected, including herself. If you have read this far into the story, if you have stayed with Maya and Earl through every challenge and triumph, then you already understand something that most people never learn. You understand that miracles are not about supernatural intervention. They are about ordinary people refusing to give up. They are about strangers becoming family. They are about the stubborn, beautiful persistence of hope in a world that often seems hopeless. Maya Robinson was a runaway with nowhere to go. Earl Whitmore was a veteran with nothing left to lose. Together, they built something that will outlast them both. And that is the greatest miracle of all. The engines still run at the Whitmore and Robinson shop. They run strong and true, their voices echoing across the Georgia hills like prayers answered and promises kept. They will keep running for as long as someone is there to listen. Someone who believes that machines have souls. Someone who is willing to put in the work. Someone who deserves a second chance. Just like Maya. Just like Earl. Just like you. The end. But actually, it is not the end. Not really. Because every ending is also a beginning. And somewhere out there right now, another child is walking down a highway with nowhere to go. Another veteran is sitting alone, waiting for something they cannot name. Another engine is sitting silent, waiting for the right person to coax it back to life. Their stories are waiting to be told. Their miracles are waiting to happen. And maybe, just maybe, watching this video will be the spark that lights their fire. Share this story. Tell someone about Maya and Earl. Remind them that courage has no age, strength has no color, and family is not about blood. Remind them that second chances are real. Remind them that they matter. And then go out and live like you believe it. Because you do. I know you do. That is why you are still here. Thank you. The shop sits quiet now in the evening hours, the day's work complete. Maya walks through the space, running her fingers along workbenches worn smooth by decades of use, touching tools that have passed through 3 generations of capable hands. She stops at a photograph on the wall. It shows her and Earl taken on that first Christmas Eve ride, both of them grinning against the winter sky. She was 13 then, a lifetime ago, a heartbeat ago. She places her palm against the glass, feeling the cool surface against her skin. Thank you, she whispers. And somewhere in the silence, she could swear she hears an engine answer. Not literally, not really, but in that deeper place where truth lives, beyond words and logic and the limitations of the physical world. An engine answers. And Maya smiles. Outside, the Georgia night unfolds in all its quiet majesty. Stars wheel overhead. The wind whispers through the trees. And in the distance, always in the distance, the sound of engines on the highway, carrying other travelers toward destinations unknown. The shovelhead and the Electra Glide rest in their places of honor, chrome gleaming in the moonlight that filters through the windows. They have earned their rest. They have done their work. But they are ready, always ready. For whenever Maya needs them, they will answer. Because that is what family does. That is what Earl taught her. That is what she teaches others now, and the legacy continues. One engine at a time, one life at a time, one miracle at a time, forever. Maya locks the shop door and walks toward the house where light spills from the windows and warmth awaits. She has dinner to make, books to read, a life to live. But before she goes inside, she pauses at the porch and looks back at the shop one more time. Good night, Earl, she says softly. The wind carries her words away, and for just a moment it sounds almost like laughter. The good kind. The kind that means everything is exactly as it should be. Maya goes inside and the door closes behind her. And in the silence of the Georgia night, 2 motorcycles wait. Patient. Ready. Loved. Just like the girl who gave them a second chance. Just like the man who gave her the same. Just like all of us, if we are lucky enough to find our people. If we are brave enough to stay. If we are wise enough to listen. The engines remember. They always do. And when dawn breaks over the Whitmore and Robinson property, as it has broken over these 5 acres for decades, as it will continue to break for decades to come, the world will keep turning, lives will keep changing, and somewhere, someone will walk into a place where they do not belong and discover that it is exactly where they were meant to be. That is the promise of every sunrise. That is the gift of every second chance. That is the soul of every engine waiting to be awakened by the right hands. Waiting for you. Start it. It is yours.